Our guest speaker today is Peter Racine, but he may be a guest, but he is no stranger as a member of our congregation. You may know Peter Racine as the former chair of our Religious Services Committee or as the former president of our congregation, and that Peter is the president of the Jaguars Foundation and is in the 16th year with the Jaguars, where he oversees the team's philanthropic and community initiatives. But you may not know that Peter has a BA in Religious Studies from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and his master's in Theological Studies from Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Or that Peter spends 20 years working with abused and neglected children, runaways, homeless, and street youth in Jacksonville, New York, Houston, Toronto, and Central America. Did you know that Peter coaches wrestling at Ed White High School? And that he runs the 9.3-mile gate river run past UU's party at Donna and Stewart's house? Or that Peter and his wife Kelly host the No Commitment Community, or NCC, a Wednesday night group meeting at their home? You can ask him what NCC is later at the potluck. Peter has a passion for integrating spiritual and ethical themes into our daily lives with practical applications. Please welcome our guest speaker today, Peter Racine.
Good morning. All right, so now that you got the dirt. I would say that, I don't know if Jeff Thunderberg is here, but when I do pass Donna and Stewart's house, Jeff Thunderberg has already passed their house quite a few minutes before I get there. So definitely speed is not the mindset of when I'm doing the river run. But, two words you very rarely hear in the same sentence: mindful and consumption, right? Now, I would say that when Thomas and Tyler and the crew, when they do their words to all generations, in 2 minutes, they tell you what you need to know, right? So if you fall asleep during my whole thing, you've already heard the message, okay? So that's a good thing. I read an article by an economist, Adam Smith, and it was called A New Kind of Personal Wealth. It was written back in 2011, and his theme was that it turns out that money can buy happiness after all. Go figure. But it does when consumers create a market for mindful consumption. And it discussed the shift related to the last recession, which we're still recovering from in Jacksonville, particularly because of our loss of financial industry jobs here and our high foreclosure rate. So this is an issue that is actually affecting us today, but it was written back in a couple years back in 2011. When Philip and I were discussing this topic, it seemed timely to explore it during the holiday season, right? This is a season of consumption. So we're going to talk about three things: what mindful consumption is, how to make gift giving and receiving more meaningful, and how we define the spiritual or ethical cost of living. Exploring that concept that an author called the spiritual bank account, but from a Unitarian Universalist perspective. So this is indeed the beginning of the holiday season, right? We have very deep meaning traditions, both secular and religious. From All Souls Day, where we as a group remembered loved ones and those that we did not know, but that had an influence and shaped our lives and others. Right into the new year, where we thoughtfully reflect on this year and make thoughtful but somewhat forgotten resolutions not too far out into the next year, right? So it's a very actual thoughtful process. At the same time, I think our religious exploration director here, Thomas, would say, it seems like during the holidays, an alien life force takes over our bodies, right? And creates this insatiable desire to consume goods. Right? I mean, all of a sudden it's like, why are we buying this? Right? So we buy things, we give things, we receive things. Now, this force doesn't just come from stores and media. It comes from our family, our children, our friends, even the companies we work in. But I think perhaps most importantly, as we're being mindful about this and aware, it really comes from our own selves, our own expectations, our traditions, and our cultural norms that we've kind of absorbed, and we kind of believe they're right. I want to share this story. This is actually written by a Christian evangelist, Dr. Abe Thomas. He writes, he was recently traveling. He said, I was traveling from my hotel to the airport in a large city in Asia a few weeks ago. While I passed a busy traffic area, I noticed an elderly lady by the street asking alms to people who stopped by the traffic light. I asked the driver to slow down so I could help her with some money, and I did. The young man who drove me appreciated what I did, and he mentioned that during that time, the country was celebrating a national festival, and most businesses gave away expensive presents to their employees who already had the means to buy them or already had them. He wished that if the affluent in the society redirected those resources to the needy around the area, the city would be a better place, and many lives could be changed for good. He also added, that's what God expects from us, not an extravagant exchange of expensive gifts among the affluent and fortunate, but rather redirecting those resources to ones who really need help. And these themes are Jewish themes, Muslim themes, Buddhist themes, Christian themes, Unitarian themes. They go back to all bases of our religious underbringing. So he said, it made perfect sense to me what I heard from a hotel taxi driver who makes $100 a month to support his parents and family. He concluded by noting that this year, the National Retail Federation is projecting that Americans will spend more than $600 billion on Christmas. Now, I didn't verify that number, but whatever that is, that's a lot of money to change the lives of a significant number of people in the world. And not only that, he notes, most of those gifts aren't even used by the recipients. Now, think of that money and reflect on this quote from Reverend Tim Dombeck. He is the co-author of Making the Annual Pledge Drive Obsolete, which we were asked to read as a congregation. And so he says, nothing you can purchase, buy, own, possess, or collect, nor any trip you can make to any part of the world, nor any sight you will see, is more valuable than the money you give to others in need. That's pretty prophetic. Perhaps that quote is the most enlightened stage of mindful consumption I can give you. So in my own family, we were a small Catholic family. We only had 5 kids. So many of the other Catholic families on our street had 7, 8, 9 kids. You know, but at Christmas time, how we fantasized about being Protestant. How jealous we were of the Methodist family and the Lutheran family because they only had 2 kids. Now, they got a mountain of Christmas gifts in comparison to our families. You know, just as with many of you, most of those gifts, really, they were put aside within a week. Right? Rarely if used again, and by spring, they were in the church or the school rummage sale. My wife and Kelly and I thought about the stress that both of our parents must have had with 5 children, and we knew we wanted to do something different, provide a different focus for ourselves and our daughter Miriam. Now, holiday families and gift giving can be stressful, right? I think we can all agree on that. It can actually, though, scientifically has been proven, can make us sick. For many, Christmas time can be particularly stressful if our families of origin have maintained traditional Christmas roles and we've moved on from them. Others are struggling financially, and the expectation is to make this holiday special for your family with gifts that you just can't afford. And it leaves you depressed. For many of us, the entire commercialization of the holiday season just is a complete turnoff. Christmas decorations don't go up after Halloween anymore. They're up literally by Labor Day in some stores. So in fact, we can agree that it is easy to get sucked up in mindless consumption. But what if we, as a consumer, could be a consumer that actually made us feel better, relieved our physical tension, promoted emotional well-being, and actually, for Unitarian Universalists, would be spiritually transcendent? Would we like that? I think we would. This is what we call mindful consumption. And the first step is to approach the holidays in a mindful way. What is important to you and why? And then be aware. Be willing to step out of your body. If you are going to be somewhere on a Friday morning after Thanksgiving, be aware of that. Don't feel guilty about it. If you want the thing at the right price, you should get it. But be aware. Be aware of your feelings. Be aware around you what you are doing. And with that awareness, the next moment is relishing your experience. Be in the present moment. Don't be anxious about the next party, the next function, the next shopping trip. Be present and be thankful. As Karen said, have a spirit of gratitude in the moments you are in. Everybody in this room is in the 99.9 percentile of the entire world, right? There's something to be thankful for that. Very few people, and I can say probably 100% of the people, are not worried about where they're going to have dinner today in this room. Let's be grateful for that. According to researchers from the University of British Columbia, Harvard, and Virginia, I only went to Rutgers, so I had to get the big guys. In a paper on the Journal of Consumer Psychology, said most people don't know the basic scientific facts about happiness. What brings it about and what sustains it. So they don't know how to use their money to acquire it. Smith goes on to say, perhaps our biggest misunderstanding is the link between increased wealth and increased well-being. Now, that correlation has been shown to be modest at best. And research at the National Academy of Sciences found that while earning more may lead us to think we have better lives, any income beyond roughly about $75,000 a year does nothing to boost our day-to-day moods. Why is that? Partly it's because when you make more money, you get used to having more money. And when you do that, you get accustomed to spending more money. So as a result, the extra happiness we get from more money evaporates because now we've raised our consumption. With higher pay comes higher aspirations, which unfulfilled leaves us frustrated. Now, consumption in and of itself is not bad. We need to consume, whether that we consume oxygen, food, resources. The key is what we do with that consumption. That's why we need to be mindful. Mindful consumption is the act of consuming in order to produce something that transcends the consumption. Does that make sense? What you're consuming, if you're mindful about it, will transcend that consumption. We're going to give some examples about that. But that greater good could be economic, such as consuming and doing an experience instead of buying a gift. We'll talk about that. Ethical, such as consuming less meat, which costs exponentially more to produce. Or spiritual, as it brings us closer to our loved ones, our neighbors, communities, and those in need. So we look at economic, ethical, spiritual benefits from consumption. Now, insights from psychology and behavioral economics suggest that when it comes to happiness, I think everybody kind of knows this, but it's worth saying. What you spend your money on can matter more than how much of it you have. Studies have shown that putting more cash towards experiences rather than stuff, buying a gift for someone else rather than yourself, and even simply anticipating a purchase make us happier. So if you're not an experiential spender already, we're going to talk about that. And it doesn't make any difference what kind of experience you choose. the experience itself is less important than, as Nike would say, to just do it. Now, some of us do service auctions where you buy a dinner, right? Anybody could spend $30 or $40 to go out to eat, right? We do it through the service auction because we are making a mindful consumption. We're mindful, and because we want to fellowship with other people. We want to have that communal experience. The key to valuing an experience like taking tennis lessons or learning to rock climb over things like buying a TV or cell phone is that we actually acclimate to new things quickly. So it's not long before the new thing blends into the background of our life. Experiences, on the other hand, stay fresher longer, which makes us happier. They are more likely to strengthen our social bonds, something that boosts our overall happiness. Doing an activity together increases its value. For example, you can take an individual karate class or buy karate class for your child, and that becomes experiential, right? But if you add taking a mother-child class, it further leverages your consumption. So now you build closer ties with the two of you. You also expand your universe as you're now opening up to friendships and connections with other kids and adults that you probably weren't in the same circle with beforehand. So Nick Marks, the co-founder of the Center for Wellbeing and a fellow at the New Economics Foundation in London, says, "We can take some delight in the fact that our well-being is much more driven by our relationships than by our household income." University of Wisconsin-Madison professor Thomas Dallaire and Ariel Kalel of the University of Chicago, they studied the relationship between happiness and different kinds of consumption. And they found that only two kinds of consumption, leisure, like vacations, and entertainment, sports equipment, and vehicles, buying your car, correlated with happiness. Not because of the things themselves, but because these things promote social connectedness. We get pleasure from the experience of a family vacation, entertainment shared with friends, the camaraderie of going to a Jaguars game. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't in here. No, the camaraderie of going to sports. And the Jaguars have won too last, so I'm a little bit happier these days. So even vehicles, which are kind of that iconic, the icon of conspicuous consumption, because, of course, everybody has a Prius in this room, so that's how we're conspicuous in a Unitarian Universalist community. But they connect us with our loved ones and our community. So the study found that other kinds of consumption appeared unrelated to well-being. So this idea of happiness extends from before the purchase, through it, and afterwards. It's an amazingly long life cycle. And their study showed there's a reason. Anticipation is fun. We're going to go to a game. We're going to do an event. And afterwards, merely thinking about the experiences put participants in a better mood than reminiscing about a purchase of a material item. So I want to give you an example. As a Christmas gift to my godson, Callie and I promised him and his brother and sister a trip to the movies and the food court. So off Callie and I bravely went to Orange Park Mall with a 6, 7, and 8-year-old in hand. So the experience started firsthand. Now, I know this is an intergenerational service, and our young people have been fairly bored to now, and some of our adults. So I'm with you. I understand, okay? So, but if you are young and you're getting ready to do some gift giving or receiving, think about this, okay? So first of all, there's the anticipation by the children of what was going to happen, all right? A few days before, we met with them, and we talked about the movies that were out. Now, Transylvania Hotel 2 was out. I did not want to go see it. Okay. And the Charlie Brown movie was out. I wanted to go see it. So I had a bigger vote, I understand. But what I said to them is I'd like to take them to go see the Charlie Brown movie. Now, they weren't really familiar with the characters. So we had to talk about unlucky Charlie Brown, who is likable, but fairly a blockhead, we might call him in the movie. His dog Snoopy, who thinks he's a human, and kids could relate to that. And his sidekick Woodstock. And Lucy, who always psychs Charlie Brown out and tells him she's not going to pull the ball away before he kicks it, and always does, right? So we had the anticipation. Now, right up to that morning, it was palatable in the kids. 2 of the kids wore shirts that we had given to them last Christmas. So they were mindful on what they were going to wear in this outing. That's pretty amazing, right? And then during the car ride down, we went over the characters again, whether we would have popcorn and drinks, what we would eat afterward, and if ice cream was on the menu. During the movie, with unlimited popcorn, as each character emerged, the kids recognized them. Now, we loved it. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to break it, but Sally does something she doesn't do in the comic strip. So, I'm not Sally, the girl with the red head. Right, the girlfriend of Charlie Brown. So the movie was actually great for adults and kids. And as we headed to the food court, we discussed what we learned and what we liked. And then on to the decisions of what we're going to eat. And the oldest proudly exclaimed to Kelly that he and Mr. Peter were going to share a Philly cheesesteak. And ready to go. We headed to the ice cream shop after a visit to Santa and on our way home. So on the way home, of course, the first thing they said is, "When are we doing this again?" And we discussed the merits of going to Chuck E. Cheese or a movie. And apparently they have their advantages and disadvantages. So what did all this do? It created anticipation. It raised our endorphins. It created thoughtfulness, even down to the idea of what they were going to wear to go out with us. And the whole sense of community throughout the whole experience that we had of walking together, visiting Santa. And I think it created a memory, right? So the entire course of the experience clearly transcended the act of consumption, which probably cost about $70 for the afternoon. Many, but not all of us, have discretionary dollars to spend, and we are grateful for this privilege. However, no matter what our income, being mindful of the cost of living goes beyond the financial cost. Cambridge, England businessman Philippe Zelinsky has defined it as our spiritual cost of living. He says there is a financial cost of living, and we need to be mindful of living within our means. But he asks us to explore the concept of our spiritual bank account. How are we investing our time in activities that boost virtue, good wishes, peace, problem solving, and altruism? On the other hand, how much time are we wasting valuable spiritual resources, even going into spiritual bankruptcy through greed, anger, creating problems, being anxious, or being self-centered? As both the young people and the older people look at the holiday season, how can we create experiences with each other over just consuming material goods? For the children among us, you can think of something you'd like to do with your parents or grandparents. I think all parents have gotten the card from their kid. I will do the dishes this week, or I will do this, or I will, it's kind of a little list of what I'd like to, give to you. And that's really cool. But I think for the kids in the room, maybe what we want to think about is, instead of doing something for our parents or grandparents, maybe we say, I would like to do this with you. We can do the dishes together, or we can go out together. We can do a movie together. And so it doesn't have to cost a lot of money either. Just going down to the landing to see the tree or the fountain, just doing an experience together will be meaningful. And for the kids in the room, what I think you don't realize is it's meaningful to you, but I think it's also meaningful to your grandparents. They sometimes kind of get, it's my grandma, she gave me a card, that's great, But I think they also want meaningful experiences with you. And Game Boy and things like that probably may not be that meaningful experience. So you got to do something old school. As a church community in fellowship with one another, how do we approach the holidays mindfully? We all, not all, but everybody pretty much prepared a meal today, right? We consume something, and we are going to have an experience. And if I get out of here, we'll have it earlier than later, which is even better. So we create experiences as a community. But let me think about that. It cost money and time to prepare the community picnic we did with the apartment complex. It cost money and time to do the Blue Boat celebration, or a float, which was done for the first time in the Gay Pride Parade. In each case, the consumption by our community was transformed into a greater good for ourselves and others. In the book, How to Make the Annual Pledge Drive Obsolete, there are many suggestions for increasing our individual and collective spiritual bank accounts. Karen Kemp and I pulled together some of these ideas, and we're going to print this out and have it available for you to have during the holiday season. But basically, let us be grateful for the good life we have and see that as a commitment to a different and more fulfilling way to have authentic relationships with others and with our planet. That we as a community agree to confront the consumer culture and be forward-looking as a church in how we consume. That we agree in our principles as Unitarian Universalists that we will live a just, manageable, and sustainable lifestyle. That we like to nurture warm and caring relationships because that's the most consistent measure of happiness. That we achieve debt-free living, the ultimate freedom that allows us to pursue our lives of greater meaning and purpose. That we practice voluntary simplicity along with debt-free living. Voluntary simplicity strives to make simple living more acceptable. And I love the first hymn that we had that Jeannie chose today, because through simple living you are unencumbered by stuff, which is soul-stifling, and debt, which is onerous on us as a nation, a community, and a family. Reclaim Sabbath. Make sure you take downtime for yourself. It doesn't have to be on a Sunday, but it should be some time that you're taking time for yourself. I can tell you, what better gift to yourself than to give yourself some time? Practice good acts like we do. Reduce consumption of meat. Have meatless days at home or go vegetarian at certain times, or all the time. Go green at home. Zero landscaping, recycling, and engaging in service projects. They actually make you feel better. If you haven't gone on an overseas trip, do an overseas trip. Do a mission trip, a Unitarian mission trip. Connecting with others outside of your normal social circle will raise and transcend you as a person. Ultimately, I think we have to confront the myths of scarcity. We already have everything we could possibly need for happiness right in front of us, right here in our own lives, with our families and our friends, in our church, in our community. And finally, be generous. Generosity is the highest standard of creating happiness, giving to someone else. So, you guys ready? Mindful consumption, great experiences. I want to hear about them. What happens? If you're ready for the holidays, my wish is that each one of us truly enjoy each and every moment as we mindfully experience transcendence. Thank you.